Emma Clark had been searching for a fresh start when she found the job listing. Blackwood Academy, a prestigious yet secluded boarding school tucked away in the countryside, was looking for a new teacher. It seemed like the perfect opportunity to leave behind her old life, her mistakes, and the nagging loneliness that had followed her for years. The drive to the school took longer than expected. The road wound through dense forests, and the fog thickened as she neared her destination. By the time she arrived at the grand iron gates of Blackwood Academy, dusk had settled, casting eerie shadows across the towering, ivy-clad building. Emma stepped out of her car and stared up at the old Gothic structure. Something about it felt wrong. The headmistress, Mrs. Holloway, greeted her at the entrance with a tight smile that never quite reached her eyes. "We're pleased to have you here, Miss Clark," she said in a voice as cold as the autumn wind. "I trust you'll find Blackwood unique." Emma followed her inside, and as the heavy doors creaked shut behind her, she felt an unsettling weight settle in her chest. The first thing Emma noticed about the students was their silence. They sat in their desks with impeccable posture, their eyes trained on her every movement, but not a single one of them spoke. When she asked them questions, they would respond by writing answers in neat, perfect handwriting, but their lips never moved. At first, she assumed it was part of the school's strict discipline, but as the days passed, the silence gnawed at her nerves. The only sounds in the classroom were the scratching of pens on paper and the occasional creak of the old wooden floors. One evening, as she graded assignments in the dimly lit staff lounge, Mr. Grayson, another teacher, leaned in close and whispered, "Best not to ask too many questions." Emma frowned. "Why don't they speak?" Mr. Grayson's face paled. "They used to." Emma didn't press further, but that night, as she walked back to her quarters through the empty hallways, she caught something out of the corner of her eye. A shadow, but not her own. It stretched unnaturally across the wall, slithering along the floor before disappearing around a corner. She froze, staring at the spot where it had vanished. Her heart pounded in her chest. The more time Emma spent at Blackwood, the more she noticed things that didn't make sense. The students' shadows seemed to move on their own, flickering and twisting, even when the children sat perfectly still. One day, she caught Lillian, a quiet girl with wide, fearful eyes, staring at her own shadow in terror, as if it were whispering secrets only she could hear. "Lillian," Emma asked softly, kneeling beside her desk, "is something wrong?" Lillian's hand trembled as she wrote down a single word: run. Emma's stomach turned. She pressed gently. "Lillian, do you know something about this school?" Lillian shook her head violently, tears welling in her eyes. Emma wanted to comfort her, but before she could say another word, Mrs. Holloway appeared in the doorway. "Miss Clark," the headmistress said coolly, "a word, please." Emma glanced down at the note again, but it was gone. In the following weeks, Emma's unease grew stronger. The school felt suffocating, as if the very walls were closing in on her. Late one night, she decided to explore the East Wing, the one area of the school she had been explicitly warned to avoid. Her footsteps echoed down the empty hall as she pushed open the heavy doors. Dust hung thick in the air, and the corridor was lined with rows of abandoned desks. Each one had a name carved into the wood, names she didn't recognize, names that weren't on any of the student rosters. A chill ran down her spine as she reached the last desk. Her fingers traced over the deep grooves in the wood. Emma Clark. A whisper echoed through the empty hall, sending ice through her veins. "You shouldn't be here." Emma spun around, but the corridor was empty, except for the shadows stretching unnaturally toward her. Terrified, Emma delved into the school's past, searching the dusty archives in the library. She discovered old yearbooks where the students' faces were blurred, their expressions eerily absent. The farther she looked back, the fewer teachers appeared in the records, many of them vanishing mid-term, their names hastily scratched out. She found a journal belonging to the previous teacher, Miss Barlow, detailing her own descent into madness. "They take your voice first," the entries read. "Then your memories, then you become one of them." Emma slammed the book shut, breathing hard. Was she next? Determined to escape, Emma packed her things and tried to leave that night. But no matter how many times she walked the long hallway to the front entrance, she always found herself right back at the same door. The school wouldn't let her leave. The students, silent and staring, watched her every move. And their shadows, they were getting closer. Lillian found her in the hallway, clutching a notebook to her chest. "You have to burn it," she whispered. Emma's breath hitched. "Burn what?" Lillian handed her the notebook, the same one she had read in the archives. It felt cold, as if it pulsed in her hands. "The school," Lillian whispered, her lips trembling. "It keeps us here. Don't let it take you." Desperate, Emma rushed to the library and set fire to the journal, the flames licking hungrily at the pages. The moment the book burned, a low, guttural groan echoed through the building. The shadows recoiled, flickering wildly as if in pain. She grabbed Lillian's hand, running toward the entrance one last time. This time, the doors flung open, and Emma stumbled outside into the cold night air. She turned back once to see Mrs. Holloway standing in the doorway, her shadow stretching unnaturally behind her, eyes dark and hollow. "You'll come back," the headmistress said softly. Emma didn't stop running. Weeks later, Emma sat in her tiny apartment, far from Blackwood Academy, trying to rebuild her life. She told herself it was over, but deep down, she knew the school wasn't done with her. Then one morning, an envelope arrived in the mail, sealed with the Blackwood Academy crest. Inside was a single note: "We remember you." Emma dropped the letter, her hands shaking, and glanced toward the mirror across the room. For a split second, her shadow didn't move with her. Some places never let you go,